the Roman Testament, it seems kind of fake to me. Today is October 3rd, 2016. This is another lesson in the New Testament is Fake series. The lesson is entitled today, Times of the Book. It seems when I read the Old Testament scriptures that when Israel had the book of the law restored to them, or they found their writings or so, if they were lost or were in captivity and came back and were being restored, that they found the book of the law, as we're going to read here, or somehow it was restored to them and they were able to move on again with the Most High. You know, when things were about to change, or things were, they were going through a change for the better, like coming out of captivity, or they just returned from captivity, or they were just cleansing themselves and deciding to turn around, right? They were repenting. So these were the times that it seems the book came to them, or when something good was going on between them and the Most High, as opposed to when things are going real bad, a lot of demise and destruction going on, then they're getting the book. That's not a time of restoration. That's a time of judgment, right? Because it didn't keep the instructions that were in the book. Now, it just came to me as a thought today that the New Testament, created by, as I have shown and many others, by the Romans, who would have gotten help from the Greeks and the Egyptians and so on, right? Sold out Hebrews. But it seems largely a work of the Roman Empire. Some have asked the question, why is the New Testament written in Greek when you're dealing with Hebrews? And I've been looking into the Hebrew language recently. Now, I'm thinking today that some have said, well, it was written, the New Testament was written in Hebrew. And then they're saying, well, we have the book of Matthew in Hebrew. I mean, it seems to me the whole thing was written in Greek, possibly. But maybe they created one in Hebrew, book of Matthew, just to show that, this is a Hebrew thing and it's the Israelites that did this, and see, here it is, but the rest of the New Testament in Hebrew was lost. To me, it just more seems like that's just a whole trickery of Rome, right? The Roman Empire, to say, hey, here it is in Hebrew. Now I'm just wondering how funny this sounds, that they tell us that Christus would have been speaking Aramaic at that time. Right? And, they said the Hebrews would have been Hellenized, right? And they were speaking Greek as well. But mostly I've heard that they were speaking Hebrew all my life. All of a sudden I started looking into it. Now you hear, well, they were speaking Greek. Can we get some of the story straight for once in our lives? Were they speaking Greek or were they speaking Hebrew? Now, let's say they were really that much Hellenized, which seems kind of strange to me, to the point where, if they're speaking Greek, why all this Aramaic stuff, and people holding that Christus was actually speaking Greek back then? Speaking Aramaic back then. And they're like, see, it's on the cross. Anyway, if he's speaking Aramaic, and if the Hebrews are speaking Greek, why is it that you're publishing a New Testament supposedly in Hebrew? Why not publish it in the Greek, which it said it was? Because now we're being told that it was actually written in Hebrew and then translated to Greek. If they're speaking Greek and their Lord Christus is speaking Aramaic, why publish it in Hebrew when we are told in my Hebrew language search to show that something is wrong with the Hebrew language? We are told that the Hebrew was pretty much dead by that time when Christus came, which should be the reason why he's speaking Aramaic. So the Hebrew is dead. Now we're told, well, officials used it at a high level in official government business and so on for business, right? Government business, like the diplomats use the Hebrew for that only or mainly. So here we got the Hebrews speaking Greek because they became Hellenized, supposedly. They're speaking Greek. The Christus is speaking Aramaic. You got a Greek New Testament, and then there are strong claims of Christus speaking Aramaic. Then somebody publishes supposedly a Hebrew New Testament. Like, what a mass of confusion. Telling us, well, Matthew is in Hebrew. Well, what about the rest of the New Testament? Only Matthew needs to be in Hebrew? Like since Hebrew was used as an official language for diplomats, all of a sudden those diplomats who don't care anything about the God of Israel, we are sure, in Rome, they don't care anything about that, but some diplomat, they just gets up and says, hey, why don't you print me a special copy of that in Hebrew, the book of Matthew? I don't need the rest of the Gospels in Hebrew or the epistles. I just want Matthew. For some reason, he just wants Matthew alone in Hebrew. He doesn't seem to want Paul in Hebrew, Pauline epistles in Hebrew or something like that. Or the final ending book, Revelations, to tell the end of the world in Hebrew. He just wants Matthew for some odd reason. Just give me Matthew. From an official request, I just want Matthew in Hebrew. So the whole thing of how the New Testament was written in this language, then in that, then an official wants this in a dead Hebrew language and whatever. Like, what is the point of trying to get that done in a dead language? You're bringing a new covenant, a new testament for new life, for the future, in a dead language Hebrew in Matthew. Does that make sense? Is that where politicians who are supposed to be visionaries are going? Holding on to dead things when Greek was the one that survived with the New Testament? Anyway, what I'm trying to show here is that the as opposed to the New Testament that came when there was a demise and a destruction of the Hebrews, and they're going into their diaspora, running away from the Roman Empire and so on, right? In total shameful defeat. As opposed to that, what we would call the Old Testament today, or just call them the law books, those were given at times, it seems to me, and I can't do this lesson fully today, but those books from the prophets and so on, and Moses and so on, with the law, were given at times when Israel was not suffering defeat, like as in the New Testament when we were under the power of the Romans and running from them, fleeing into Africa lands and so on. But it was given at times when Israel had just come out of some kind of bondage from some enemy, or getting ready to repent and clean up themselves. And so, or there was some kind of a promise from the Most High as they, renewed themselves with the Most High, right? So there was something good happening, or there was good things ahead. That's when Israel usually got their word from the Most High, got their scrolls, their writings put together, or found it again if it was lost, right? But we find the New Testament, the New Covenant, is being given at a time when Israel isn't looking forward to good things, but they're actually running in defeat. You see my point here with this lesson? Somehow the New Testament, again I say, breaks from the, might I say, tradition of the Old Testament to giving a new book, a new covenant book, when Israel is in defeat and has to flee their own land, running into different parts of Africa, only to be picked up later by the Arabs and later on by this North American Hebrew slave trade that brought us over here to the West. Alright? So let's look at some scriptures here. The first one here I'll point out is that the first time when some kind of major word or commandments were given to Israel as a nation that was just being set up and created. Around that time, after Israel came out from Egyptian bondage, Moses went up to talk to the Most High on the mountain. Finger of God wrote, bam, you get a writing right there. The writing is coming of what we call the Ten Commandments, at a time when Israel had just entered into some good times. They just came out of Egyptian bondage, as opposed to fleeing from the Romans in the New Testament when the New Testament book was being rolled out or created, right? So Israel just coming out of bondage at this time now, when they're going to really become that nation now, right? They're just being born as the kind of, nation coming out of Egyptian bondage. They get that 10 Commandments slapped onto the stone, right? Or written onto the stone. Then it says here in Exodus 25:16, and thou shalt put into the ark the testimony which I shall give thee. Right? So here again you find out the Most High saying, hey, preserve this stuff. Now if you look at this, when it says put into the ark the testimony which I shall give thee, if you look at the word testimony, it says, because I've been teaching, in my Hebrew language and Aramaic language lessons, searching for our real language. Is it Hebrew? And it doesn't appear to be. But I've been really looking at this, and it seems here that when he says here, put this testimony in the ark, when you look at the word for testimony, it's talking here about a witness, right? A witness. And we know it's supposed to be in there in the ark as a witness, right? So it's going to tell what Israel's contract with the Most High is all about, what it entails, and it's going to be a witness there, right? So I mean, if we go off track, that's going to hold the truth about what path we should have been on. But also, as a witness, it's going to tell in the future who Israel really is and what Israel really is about, and that Israel actually cut a contract with the Most High. That's a witness. The Most High also lists his people as a witness, right? He said, ye are my witnesses. So here it is, the writings would be a witness, and the people themselves a witness, right? The people of Israel. Right? So, I mean, when I look at this, you see that the writings are very, very important, but as a witness, they come at a time when Israel was being set up and was being empowered, not when they were running in defeat in the New Testament times, when the New Testament was being created and rolled out. Now, the next one here I want to look at now, from 2 Kings 22 and verse 8, we know the whole story of Josiah. This was a time when the Assyrian Empire was up. It says here in 2 Kings 22 verse 8, and Hilkiah the high priest said unto Shaphan the scribe, I have found the book of the law in the house of the Most High. And Hilkiah gave the book to Shaphan, and he read it, and brought it to the king, and so on, if you read the rest of it. So basically it's saying that Josiah said, hey, we got to repent about all this, because now we found the book of the law, and so on and so forth, right? We didn't realize properly in recent times how far we've gone astray, but now we found the book of the law. It clarifies things for us, and so on, right? This was coming at a time when Josiah was actually bringing some reform, as they say, right? Trying to clean things up in the nation of Israel and in the land, right? Because they'd been under Assyrian rule and domination for some time, right? And what had happened was that even Assyrian deities were in the land, right? We know his father and so on had brought in a lot of that stuff and was giving himself to that, although he kind of repented later on. But the Assyrian deities and sacred prostitutes, like temple prostitutes and so on, were still in the land. And these temple prostitutes were wearing special clothes fit for that kind of, what you call it now, not procession, but whatever they were doing, right? They had their special clothes as the temple prostitutes and so on, right? In the land. So he was clearing up this stuff. He was getting rid of their clothes and their houses that they stayed in and so on. He was getting rid of these Assyrian deities, where they worship Baal and so on. And he was burning them in the fields of Kidron, we're told. He was cleansing the tabernacle, right? And you have to understand as well that when he's doing this, it was so important because these Assyrian idols had both spiritual and a political significance as well, right? Spiritual, of course, we understand, because it was taking the people's hearts away from the Most High, causing them to worship these idols. But it also had political significance because it was showing the link between Israel and Assyria, where Israel was subservient still in some sense to Assyria. So Assyria still had some kind of an upper hand, right, in the picture right there, right? And so, in turning back to the Most High, it's like, yeah, we got to get rid of this spiritual bondage, but also this political stuff, because whenever Israel returned to the Most High with their heart, their oppressors and their rulers that were dominating them would just fall off. So it was important for him in cleaning up the land to get rid of these Assyrian idols, right? Even the priests of Baal, might I say, the Israelite priests who had sold over unto Baal and the different cults of the Assyrian gods. Even those priests, Josiah had them removed as well, right? Those priests that had, worshipped Baal, and they were worshipping like the sun and moon and so on, and he killed even the horses and burned the chariots and so on, got rid of them that were used in heathen ceremonies towards these other gods, right? So he was going through a time of cleaning up stuff and clearing things up. It was during this time now, they're saying probably 620, 622 BC, around that time, when he was doing all this stuff and they found the book of the law. So here again, what I'm showing is that at a time when Israel is going through a good time now, might I say, where we know the Assyrian Empire was still there, but they were just about to fall, right? But they're going through a good time in terms of they are now deciding to turn to the Most High because of this King Josiah, thank the Most High. It's good time because now Israel is about to be restored. They're restoring themselves with the Most High by repenting, getting rid of the idols and cleaning up stuff, cleaning up the land, cleaning up their lifestyle, and getting rid of all these extra gods, these strange gods and so on, right? And that, of course, is going to lead to Assyria, the Assyrian Empire, just falling and losing their hold on Israel. So, in this kind of good time where Israel is being restored spiritually, and literally, physically, things are changing in the land for the better in terms of returning to the Most High. This is the time period in which the writings again of the law books were found, restored. Right? So again, a book is now being rolled out to them in Josiah's time that turns out to be a verified, real copy of the instructions of the Most High. When Israel is having something good happen and the Assyrian Empire is going to be cut off from dominating them. Now we find the New Testament writings are being set up and introduced and put together at a time when Israel was going to be dominating now, when Israel was going to be rising up, when Judah was going to be rising up? Or is the New Testament writings of the so-called New Covenant coming in the picture in the Roman Empire when the Romans were ruling over Israel and Israel was getting ready to run in defeat and go into catacombs, hiding and so on and fleeing the land? You see what I'm saying? The books of the law, or the writings that tie us to the Most High, usually come or surface at a time or get found again at a time when something good is happening for Israel, when Israel is being restored, or when Israel had just come out of some kind of slavery or bondage, and so on, right? And when Israel is about to get some victory. Yet the New Testament, as a so-called New Covenant, is coming at a time when Israel is not going to get no victory over the Romans, but the Romans are going to further persecute and kill us and chase us out of our own land. Do you still think the New Testament is the real writings of the Most High? Or is it a trick? You got to think about that. Right? Let me read something here to you and close this off. From a commentary I have here on 2 Kings with the whole story of Josiah. Partway through this part that I'm reading here, it says, the book of the law found has generally been in Josiah's time they're talking about, has generally been recognized as the original corpus of Deuteronomy, which means like, original writings, right? So not no fake tampered with copy, like they went into some kind of bondage or slavery, or the Assyrians are ruling over them and the Assyrians took it and changed that kind of stuff, right? They found proper copyright of the book of Deuteronomy, right? And I've been saying to you in my search for the Hebrew and Aramaic language and stuff to find a real language, and that something is probably wrong with our book. I've been saying to you that this current book that we have called the Bible, something is probably wrong with it. Because I've pointed out we have too many disagreements based on the book. Something is probably wrong with it. Right? That does not necessarily mean, although possibly, that what's contained in it is wrong, but most likely so, because the Most High complained that the scribes in Jeremiah 8 verse 8 were tampering with the writings, right? So most likely something went on there, right, that we've been presented with, as opposed to it happening because the Most High said it, but then they ended up giving us a real copy. You think our enemies are going to take our book from us, separate us from our book through the slavery that we've had over the years, and then just give us the real copy that they confiscated so long ago? Because Rome took all our writings, right? No, if they're giving us back the book, they would have given us the wrong copy, because when the Hebrews have their real book, like in the book of Josiah, things get better for Israel. They're not going to take your books and confiscate your books from you, because they know it will hold you down if you don't have the real copy to follow, and then say we are able to dominate them by stealing from them the name of the Most High and stealing from them their book, and then turn around and have power because of that, and then end up saying, okay, now we're going to give them back their book of power and the name of the Most High, so that they can now turn around and dominate us now and break from under our power. They're not going to just give us back our book just like that. The Most High has to do that, right? So when you look here now, it says the original Deuteronomy was what was found, right? Especially chapters 5, 12 to 26 and 28, which includes our curses in Deuteronomy 28, right? And chapter 5 probably constituted the original introduction to the actual laws of chapters 12 to chapters 26 of Deuteronomy, and chapter 28 contains the curses on those who disobeyed the law, curses which promoted Josiah to such a display of penitence and sorrow. The reforms described in the next chapter all find their basis in Deuteronomy and in no other book of the law in the Old Testament. The book had probably been in existence at least since the early days of Manasseh, but the Assyrianizing reign of that king was obviously not the time to propose its social and cultic reforms, and it was deposited in the temple and lost. So, my understanding of that is this. During the time of Manasseh, when a lot of sellouts had happened, and probably so by the domination of the Assyrian Empire, the book of the law was put aside because it wasn't time to deal with that, because their hearts had gone away from the Most High and had taken on Assyrian deities, right? And the Assyrians weren't going to have that, especially since they have this king Manasseh under their power, right? So the book of the law was put away. It wasn't time to deal with that because nobody's trying to return to the Most High at that point. It was put away, hidden away, and that's how later on now, when things are trying to turn around now under Josiah, his grandson, that the book of the law was found, right? That it was found. Because at the time when Israel is starting to turn around now under this good King Josiah, that's when the book gets restored, when something good is about to happen. Not like in the New Testament times, when the New Testament is coming in, when things are going bad for Israel. This should be the last time when the rest of us ran out of our land from the Romans and we never got to claim it again. Running from Jerusalem, right? So the book was hidden away. But you notice that when the real book that they said was deemed to be a correct copy, a good copy, right? Original. It was found at a time when the hearts of the people were turning back to the Most High under a king that said, let us return to the Most High, let us clean up the tabernacle, clean up everything, clean up our lifestyle, get rid of the foreign deities and so on. It came at that time, and the book just automatically, but of course by the Most High's doing, the book just came to them, the proper real book. Now that Israel in 2016 is still scattered in strange lands of captivity, and Israel is still selling out to the slave mentality of the slaving nations that are slaving away at us, even though we're doing it a little bit different now. We're not actually cutting and picking cotton and so on, literally anymore. We're doing the slavery in other ways. But right now, it could be argued, and that's what I'm arguing, that we don't have that proper book in front of us when you buy a King James Bible or whichever version you want to buy, right? Because when I see these examples in the Old Testament, it shows me examples that say to me, when things are bad and Israel is not restored or in a time of restoration, they don't have the book. Or some evil sellout king of Israel hid the book because he doesn't want to deal with the book. But when Israel comes together and are uniting again to seek the Most High, to turn around and so on, or some blessings going to happen, that's when the book, the real, true, proper copy, seems to just surface and come in, or the Most High, or something good like they just come out of bondage, like with the case of Egyptian bondage, that the Most High has given them a writing and the finger of God wrote, right? Or something like that, right? So when something good for the nation of Israel is happening, the real book or some real proper writings of instructions and direction from the Most High comes and surfaces. And it puts to rest all arguments. When the finger of God wrote those commandments on Sinai, you didn't see no Israelites arguing saying, oh, but he didn't write that. We know he didn't write it because, we weren't up there to see it. No, once the writings come, they come as a witness from the Most High in a way that Israel usually just agrees with. And Israel embraces it until later on they start to slack off and they go astray again. But right away, usually examples are shown in the Old Testament, they embrace it. But in New Testament times now, when you go back and read history, you find that instead of them embracing the New Testament teachings and embracing this Christus and embracing the New Testament, the Israelites in Judah were running away from Jerusalem to flee the Roman Empire. They ran not just from the Roman Empire, they ran from the Roman Empire book, aka New Testament. Right? So you think of it. Now there's a verse here, I won't bother reading, but I'll just quote it quickly. Where, in Jeremiah 31, the Most High says, and actually Zephaniah chapter 3 too, and 3 and verse 9, it says the Most High is going to restore language and one consent and so on. How's that one consent going to come? That one consent based on the language is connected to the book. Because remember, the writings are a witness, as we read in Exodus 25 verse 16, right? It's a witness. And the witness book of the testimony of the law was written in a language that the people could read. So if it was written in a language that the people could read, it is a witness right there. So now when Jeremiah is telling you, Zephaniah 3:9 and Jeremiah chapter 31 is telling you, 31 to 34, that nobody's going to teach us again because everyone is going to know, right? Because Torah is going to be placed in our hearts. He's going to restore the word unto us. That means between those two scriptures, Zephaniah chapter 3 and Jeremiah 31, the Most High is letting you know through his prophets that when Israel is being restored and something good again is happening, again I should say, as opposed to them fleeing from the Roman Empire from a New Testament, but when something good is happening in the end times, when Israel is being restored, which means us or our children to come after us or something like that, when we are being restored again, the writings, the book is going to be restored to us and placed in our hearts, right? And it's going to come with a language that was a part of the testimony placed in the ark that will be restored, and none of us are going to argue with each other anymore about what does that Hebrew word mean, because the language was encoded in the testimony that was placed in the ark, in the written inscriptions that were placed in the ark. It has been preserved as a witness that this was the language you were speaking, that Moses was speaking and the Israelites were speaking at that time. It's going to show just what was written, and I want to see what was written on it, just like you do, right? So you see, when I say I'm searching for the language and saying something's wrong with their book, that something's wrong, because if we are based on examples in the Old Testament, the book was usually coming to us, or some instructions or writings were coming when Israel had just come out of some kind of bondage or captivity, like from Egypt or something like that, or finding the book again after the Assyrian was pushing us too far and so on, right? Those are times when it came. But we're finding now that we're given a book coming out of slavery called New Testament, called King James Version, that all of us are buying. And we're in a time that this current version of the Bible is coming to us in a time when we still had hundreds more years of slavery and domination left over us by our slave masters. You see my problem? Somehow, us getting this King James Version, which is just a popular one because we know there are other versions, it's coming. This Bible, as we have it today, has come to us in a time when Israel still had a lot more years of captivity left, and we are still captives. We are both captives, slaves and descendants of slaves. The Most High said, basically, my people will be slaves no more after he comes and he takes us away. Which means that no matter if they say slavery has been ended, that's a lie. The Most High is telling you himself. And you feel like a slave every day you get up and work and you can't make ends meet properly, right? But thankful to the Most High, I always say, for those of us who manage to do a little bit better. Thank the Most High for that. But the Most High is telling us in Jeremiah that when he comes, and even in Isaiah 11 and 12, that basically is gathering us from these lands that we've been scattered to. They're slave lands. So he's saying basically when he gathers us, at that point when he comes, we'll still be slaves, and then he's going to gather us and remove us and put us back in our land, and we'll be slaves no longer. So we're going to be slaves until he actually returns. Right? And that's when all this restoration of Torah coming back to us, and no man will teach us anymore because now we got it ourselves. It's going to be restored. And the testimony that Moses placed in the ark is going to be given back to us because it's a witness, so we have to see it and know and verify it. And because it's a testimony that's going to tell truth, when we see it, we're going to know this is the real book. We've been reading something wrong called King James Version all this time. Because when we see it, none of us are going to argue anymore, and none of us are going to teach his brother anymore this and that, because we're all going to all know it, because we'll have the testimony with us, which is a witness to tell us that all these things that happened in the Old Testament times really did happen, and that we are the children of Jacob, and so on and so forth. Not saying that the Old Testament that we have, like in the King James Version, is not useful. It's very useful because we're growing and we're moving on in leaps and bounds. We're making lots of progress with it, and by it we're finding out more and more one by one that we are the children of Jacob. So it's good, right? But I'm just saying something is wrong somewhere, right? But to close it now, I hope I have just communicated the points clear enough to show that the New Testament came up at a time from the Roman Empire when Israel was not being restored but was about to suffer further defeat from the Roman Empire, as compared to the times in the Old Testament when the book or some writings or instructions from the Most High usually came at a time when Israel was just turning around, repenting and renewing themselves, and good things were on the horizon, so to speak. Good things were about to happen, or good things had just happened, such as their enemy had just been defeated or something like that. See, that's the point I'm trying to make, right? So this whole new covenant, new testimony, or New Testament, or if you please, the Roman Testament, it seems kind of fake to me.